We are live on Facebook with Melanie Phillips. Hello, Melanie.
Hello, Abby.
We're living in historic times. Seriously, historic times. You know, I want you to move over a little bit so we don't have the microphone in front of your face like that. Okay. Just last week, we finally had the meeting of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and President Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm.
Was it good? Was it bad? What should we be reading into it? What should we not be reading into it? What do you think, Melanie?
Well, as I think we discussed before, we've only been allowed to see what we've been allowed to see.
Right.
We saw a very carefully choreographed press conference, and we don't know what was going on behind the scenes. We don't know what was actually discussed and what was agreed.
Right.
I think, though, that we can be fairly certain that what we saw wasn't so far from the truth, in that the strength of this relationship, which both of them have attested to, I think is very genuine. From all that one knows and reads of President Trump, he feels very, very warmly towards Israel. And more than that, he's not one of these people that says, I love Israel, but I'm going to basically hang it out to dry. He actually understands, or seems to understand, some key factors which we might want to talk about the Middle East, which I think previous presidents, even those which have been benignly disposed to Israel, have not actually understood at all.
Let's go. What do you think he understands, and how did he show us?
The first thing he understands is that it was very interesting to see the reaction to this press conference and what he said. Because what he said famously was, I don't care if it's a one-state solution, a two-state solution, no-state solution. I mean, whatever they want is good enough for me. And people threw their hands up in horror on both sides of the aisle, as it were. On the one hand, there were people on the left of the spectrum, political spectrum, saying, oh my God, he has torn up centuries, decades of American foreign policy, which had at its heart a two-state solution. This is appalling.
Right.
On the other hand, I was encountering people, anxious Jews, who were saying, oh my God, he has said there could be a one-state solution. This is terrible. Consequently, you got the impression that the whole thing was dreadful from both sides. Both sides failed to understand, in my view, the most important thing that he was saying.
Let's go.
He was saying a solution to the Arab-Israel impasse has to be found by the Arabs and the Israelis.
Right.
It is not something that can be imposed by America or anyone else. We are going to stand back. It's for them to decide. Now, that is a very, very big deal, because ever since the State of Israel was created, the Western world, principally America, but also Britain and Europe, have taken the view that it is for them to impose a solution.
Right.
And everything they've done, without exception, has not only made the situation worse, in my view,
I agree,
but has actually created this impasse that goes on forever, because they have actually failed to understand or acknowledge the dynamic, the key dynamic, which is an agenda of extermination against the Jewish state, and instead they've treated it as a dispute over land boundaries, and consequently have imposed their view of what a solution should look like. And that is just ridiculous and wrong. It is for the Arabs and the Israelis to decide what to do between themselves. So that's the most important thing I took away from this.
And is that something we're supposed to feel good about now?
I feel very good about that, because I think that is the necessary precondition for a proper solution to be arrived at. Now, there have to be other things also fitting into this. One of the other things that the West has done, which I think has been more than unhelpful in the Middle East, is not only to try to impose a solution, but to effectively sanitize, reward and incentivize the Palestinian exterminatory project by continuing to fund the Palestinian Authority. Forget the Hamas for a minute.
Right.
Continuing to fund the Palestinian Authority, money which goes directly into incitement, into teaching their children to hate Jews and to murder Israelis. And furthermore, America has gone along with the farce of the United Nations. okay, until President Obama and even much of President Obama's tenure, American presidents have wielded the big stick in the Security Council, so they've kind of stopped a Security Council resolution from going against Israel. But basically they've gone along with the whole farce of the United Nations, which, as far as I can see, is a kind of global instrument for the perpetuation of tyranny in the developing world, and the animus of the agenda of extermination against Israel. Now, President Trump has made it clear that from the point of view of America's own interests, that's got to stop. They are no longer going to fund Palestinian incitement. They're no longer going to fund UN rogue state, winking at rogue states to the detriment of America. Now that alters the entire dynamic of the Palestinian agenda for the last N years. Their agenda has been, ever since Arafat departed the stage, their agenda has been not to be seen to be involved in any kind of military or terrorist action. And to a certain extent, they have been standing back. They've been helping the IDF police the West Bank and so on. But their agenda has been more strategic and more devastating because they have sought to tap into the intrinsic animus against Israel in the West,
right,
in Europe in particular, and to use the route of diplomacy to delegitimize Israel and to create the facts on the ground of a Palestine state,
right,
with the willing accomplice at the UN. And they no longer have in the White House a president who's going to put up with any such stupidity at the UN. So, and in addition to that, they have a realignment in the Arab world around them. They have the so-called moderate states, Saudi Arabia, the Gulf states, who are now in an informal alliance with Israel against the common enemy of Iran. Now, all that changes the dynamic completely. It removes some, if not all, of the factors which were helping perpetuate Palestinian rejectionism, Palestinian incitement, Palestinian terror. It doesn't remove all of it at all, but it removes all the sort of pieces of that jigsaw that were in place. So now the Palestinians have got a big problem. They have to rethink their strategy. And now we can see the Hamas in Gaza have elected another even stronger man, who one might surmise will be even more into terror and war. We don't know. Right. That leaves, the Palestinian Authority. What are they going to do? I mean, we know the Palestinians never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity.
Right.
But they're now up against it. They've reached a fork in the road. They're going to have to decide: are they going to go down the path of more and overt war again? In which case they're not going to have a friend in the White House.
Right.
Or are they going to make peace properly with Israel, by which I mean accept that Israel is entitled to exist as a Jewish state.
Okay, wait 1 second. Someone said that there's static going on here, so let's fix this for a second. And then I'm going to ask that from you. 1 second, folks. Try to get rid of the static. Hopefully that'll get rid of the static for the people complaining.
Technology.
Yeah, gotta love technology. So Lou, thanks for bringing that up. I hope that fixed it. Now, I want to follow up that point with you. Based on your analysis, which I agree with, and again, and Melanie just made this video last week saying that it's not, we've always been asking the wrong question. It's not what's the solution, it's what's the problem. And you reiterated that the problem is that they want to destroy Israel, and they've always said that outright, that they want to destroy Israel. Which direction do you think they're going to go?
I am
to your own question.
Psychic. I'm not psychic. I would be amazed if they were to properly recognize Israel and say, that's it, okay, it's over, we now accept Jewish state, because then it's over. For them, it's over. The whole thing is over.
Right.
The Palestinian Authority is then over.
Right.
They have existed, and not just the Palestinian Authority, but behind them, Arab regimes in the past. They've kept themselves in power by creating this bogeyman of the wicked Jew, the terrible Israeli.
Right.
The bogeyman that that the Jews stole all our land, a lie, and the false hope, if one can use the word hope in this terrible context that one day they will get it all back.
Right.
Now, what are they going to do? Suddenly say, you know, guys, we've been saying for the last 60-something years that, you know, it's all ours and it was stolen and we were going to get it all back and this is what we're bringing you all up to do, and to murder Jews and to take it all back and to regain Tel Aviv and to regain Haifa and so on. You know what? New guy in the White House, forget all that. It's over. Now we're going to make peace with them. Everyone's going to go, what? Now, if they were smart,
Right.
they would go in that direction. They would accept that it's over. But I would imagine they will think there's always hope, and you know they got the Europeans still. They would think on side, and they're not convinced that Trump will act against the UN, and they have a number of important allies at the UN, and there are various strategic allies they can make use of. I mean, you know, they can get into bed further with Iran, for example. I mean, who knows what alliances they will make
Right.
in order to pursue their goal. In other words, it would be wonderful if reality were now to break in. But I suspect that after all these decades of telling themselves all these fairy stories and believing these fantasies that they are going to eradicate the Jews from the Middle East, I would be amazed if they were just to give up now.
Right. I happen to agree with that. What is the end game? You have an answer for that? What is the end game? Andrew is asking.
Whose end game? The Israelis or?
Andrew, whose end game are you referring to? But I guess what do you think the end game for Israel?
Israel, well, the point about Israel is it doesn't have an end game, ever. It has, you know, the game it plays is, can we get through today, this week, this month, this year, this presidency?
Right.
That's how Israel's always operated.
Right.
Now, from what he's given away, which is not much, Mr. Netanyahu seems to have an end game in mind. It would appear that he thinks that all the things that we've been talking about so far represent a sufficient change in the region and in the White House in combination to mean that now there can be finally a solution to the problem, maybe involving a confederation with Jordan. Who knows what he has in mind? But there are certain sort of historic options which everyone's kind of pushed away because they've never been anywhere near realizable.
Right.
And I suspect that in his mind there is some kind of new configuration, new kind of set of regional alliances backed by a different approach in the White House, which means that a resolution can be arrived at. It may not be a perfect resolution. It will mean compromises, but I guess it would be that would be a resolution in his mind. And I would guess this is really my entire speculation.
Melanie speculation.
I would guess that if he's thinking of the end game in terms of what's Israel going to look like in a deal that allows Israel to exist in peace and harmony, I would guess that Israel looks like Israel today with the three main settlement blocks. And the rest of it, I would guess he would say Jordan. I don't know. It's just my guess. No doubt that's wrong and he has a completely different scenario in mind. I think he
even if that's it, he's going to have tremendous amount of pressure from the right, who are not going to try their best not to let that happen.
For sure.
Because according and I've heard the language of the right, of the Baitu Party lately, saying the settlement blocks is a left wing plan of action, and that's not what according to the right wing that's against the Likud.
Okay, but what the right wing politicians fail to understand is that they have to factor in the opinion of the Israeli people. Now, if the Israeli people believe that real peace is now on the horizon, they will go a very great deal, they will go a very long way to meet the other side in order to get that peace. I was here in the year 2000. Would you believe it was the first time I ever came to Israel? But that's another story. Yes. That's another story for another time. And the first time I came was just before the second Intifada broke out. And I arrived when it appeared that finally, after decades, after not just decades of war, but all Israel had ever known was war and rejection, and finally there was a real prospect of real peace. That's how it was being presented,
right.
And the conversation then was all about, so we're going to give up half of Jerusalem in order to get this.
We're going to give everything,
because
right?
the prospect of being able to live in peace without our children having to be forfeit in the army as a matter of course, and without our having to go out of our front doors in fear and trembling that there's going to be a bomb, that price is so great. We will give up half of Jerusalem. Now that was then. And then the Second Intifada happened and the whole thing disappeared. Now, I'm not saying that people will be prepared to give up half of Jerusalem at all. All I'm saying is that the Israeli public are not where the politicians are. The public generally are not where.
No, the public just wants peace, and if they believe that it's a true peace,
not at any price.
No, but if they believe it's a true peace, almost at any price.
They will pay a heavy price for a true peace.
Right.
And that's something that Netanyahu knows. He knows that.
Right.
And he will be factoring that in. And if Habayit HaYehudi or whoever they are have any sense, they will be factoring it in too. Whether they're capable of that, I've no idea. Ideology carries everything before it sometimes. But it would be a brave politician who would go before the Israeli public if everyone could see this was it. This was the genuine article. It would be a very brave Israeli politician to go before the Israeli public and say, you know what, we don't want it. Can you see that happening? Now, will there be such a genuine peace on offer?
Right.
I'll believe it when I see it.
Right.
We're speaking hypothetically.
Right. I was going to say, hypothetically, what you're saying is 100% correct. I think, based on reality, that's never going to be the situation.
That's as may be.
Right.
That's as may be, in which case the arguments go on.
Right. But I want to stick with Jordan. I want to go to Jordan and then to Egypt. Because I read, I don't know if you followed up on this, that there was a change in language and tone from Trump on the settlements because the king of Jordan had a secret visit, or not secret, he had a surprise visit in Washington where he came unannounced, without an invitation, without a meeting, landed, requested a meeting, got the meeting with Trump, and basically told him, don't move the embassy and don't allow settlement building. And that was the change in how in his...
I don't know. It could be. I mean, Jordan is complicated. I hear many things about Jordan. The Israelis seem to think that Jordan is okay. There are people. We have the king, the king.
We are securing Jordan.
But the king is not securing Jordan.
No, not at all.
The king is in a very fragile position, and consequently, I think Jordan is deeply problematic. And quite honestly, what one reads about any such meeting, I also read that account. I don't know whether it's true. I don't know what the Jordanians would have been proposing, and I have no idea what Mr. Trump would have been responding. I don't know whether that's connected to his remarks about settlements. It may just be that he thought it was no more than, we're going to be doing enough. We don't want any extra commotion. Who knows? In other words, I've got a clue.
Got it. Okay. I wanted to ask the question. So now jumping from Jordan to Egypt. It was, what's his official position? Ayub Kara. He's now a minister without portfolio in the Prime Minister's office. He went public, I don't know whether on television or on Facebook last week, saying that Prime Minister Netanyahu is going to be talking about the Sinai plan with Trump. That Egypt, al-Sisi, has agreed therefore that a state for the Palestinian Arabs will be set up in Sinai. Any insight on that?
I have no inside information whatsoever. I've also read this. Who knows? I mean, Mr. al-Sisi has a tremendous problem in Sinai with ISIS. Sinai is, the Hamas. I mean, Sinai is a major security headache for Egypt. Now, would it be in his interests to set up a Palestinian state? Or would that be just like if a Palestinian state was set up today on the West Bank and Judea and Samaria, that would immediately become Iran, it would immediately become Hamastan or whatever. In other words, it's a no-brainer, you can't do it. I would have thought Sinai would be the same, unless Sisi intends to, rule it with a rod of iron. But in which case, does he really want to rule the Palestinians? I wouldn't have thought he would welcome that any more than he would welcome a hole in his own head. But who knows? Again,
right.
We're all in the dark here.
It's just interesting that all these. I think the good thing is, and correct me if I'm wrong, that all of a sudden all these other things are being put out there.
Yes, this is
as
true.
Opposed to just the two-state solution being the holy grail.
This is true, and that is very welcome because it was never about the division of the land between Israel and West Bank, Judea and Samaria. It was never about that. It's about stopping the war of annihilation. It's about not creating another rogue state which poses a mortal threat not just to Israel but to the rest of the region and to the wider world. In other words, this is a sort of many-headed hydra, and the Palestinians are the issue of issues because that's the way the West has fixated upon them for various reasons. They've elevated them into the cause of causes, and consequently have created that situation, their narrative, I can use that phrase, as the driver of the problem. But it was never the case.
Right.
And it isn't the case now. And my goodness, it's a complicated enough situation. If only it was as straightforward as just a division of land in terms of boundary issues.
Right.
So it is good that all these things are now on the table, that all these various options are being dusted down and looked at afresh,
right.
and in a new context.
What's your view on Saudis who feed terror and expecting Israel to help them with security? Interesting question, Irina.
Well, what's the alternative? They feed terror, true. Does that mean that Israel should turn away their offer if it is valuable, which Israel believes it to be not just valuable, but invaluable? I would say that was cutting off the nose to spite the face. Does it mean that Israel or anybody should regard Saudi as its new best friend?
Right.
Absolutely not.
Right.
My enemy's enemy is my enemy.
Right.
Sometimes my enemy's enemy is my friend. Sometimes my enemy's enemy is my friend and my enemy simultaneously. And that's the Middle East.
Right.
The latter is the Middle East. And Israel is smart, and Israel understands this, and Israel is capable of playing different
complex game.
Parts of these entities in different ways at the same time.
Got it.
A very complex game.
So to sum up the Bibi Trump historic meeting for the first time as Prime Minister President, what are your final thoughts for people to go away thinking?
I think it's a watershed. I think it promises great things. Whether those great things will happen, I haven't got the faintest idea. Unfortunately, the tragic history of the Middle East is one of opportunities squandered and promises not kept, and paths taken that are not only not of peace, but of war and death and destruction. And it's possible that we're going to go through the same cycle again. But at this stage, what President Trump has done, he has signalled an end to some of the principal fantasies, destructive fantasies, which have kept this show of death on the road in the Middle East.
All right, now we're going to jump to the General Flynn issue. I know you recently wrote an article, MelaniePhillips.com. Melanie just wrote an article about this issue of the resignation of General Michael Flynn. What's your insight, Melanie? What's going on there?
Well, I think it was a very strange affair. And there's much about it that really we don't know, and maybe we will never know. Once again, as with President Trump, I find out the whole time, the world divides into, are you for him or are you against him? Is he a sinner or is he sinned against? Actually, he can be both.
There you go.
And you have to look at these things bit by bit to work out what you think about each bit. And each bit doesn't necessarily knock out the other bit. So the Flynn thing, we really don't know quite why he resigned. It doesn't really add up. He did nothing illegal. He did nothing wrong. Everyone says that. He is said to have been too close to the Russians, but this is a man who, in something he himself wrote, was incredibly hawkish about the threat from Russia. So that doesn't really make sense either. So, according to President Trump, his offence was that he didn't tell the whole truth to Vice President Pence, as a result of which Pence went on TV and said something that was untrue, which was that in his conversations with the Russian ambassador, General Flynn had not discussed the issue of sanctions against Russia. That was untrue, and as a result, according to the president's own account, he couldn't trust somebody in that position, and consequently he had to go. Now, I have a great deal of sympathy with that, because you've got to be able to trust the person who you've put into post. However, it also appears that the White House was informed of this failure to inform Vice President Pence some 10 days or more before the balloon went up. So if it was such a hanging offence for President Trump to have in place somebody who wasn't entirely transparent, why was it okay 10 days before and suddenly it was not okay then? So the suspicion in my mind is that for reasons which we don't quite understand, it became necessary in President Trump's mind to throw Flynn under the bus. And Flynn was someone upon whom candidate Trump had relied very heavily because of Flynn's reputation as being, a stellar, sterling man of America and defense and security, etc., etc. People became reassured that if Trump could pick such a person, then Trump would be okay. So he'd relied on Flynn to get himself elected and then threw him under the bus. Now, if that's true, that's not very good, but we don't know.
Right.
Having said that, even if President Trump was at fault, even if he was at fault, and even if General Flynn was at fault, even if, there is no doubt in my mind that what President Trump is up against and what came out in the removal of General Flynn is what's called the Black State, which is the intelligence-led permanent administrative class that runs America, which acts as a kind of corporate entity, leaking like a sieve to the media, and doing stuff which actually itself is, in principle, illegal. In particular this. We became aware, because it was all leaked, that General Flynn, his conversations with this Russian ambassador had been listened to by the FBI. Now, as I understand it from what I read, American law is very specific. If you listen to a foreign entity like the Russian ambassador, if you're listening in clandestinely, and if at the other end of the phone line there is an American citizen, the identity of the American citizen has to be protected. By law, you cannot disclose his identity. The FBI said General Flynn was not under investigation. Why then were they listening to his phone call and using that phone call to leak the transcripts, allegedly, to the media? This is an offence. So, dirty tricks, to put it mildly, by unknown officials. And it's not just dirty tricks against General Flynn, it's dirty tricks against President Trump. This is an attempt to undermine him, to delegitimize him, and effectively to engineer an overturning of the democratically elected wishes of the American electorate who elected this man, Donald Trump. Now that I find very, very alarming indeed. So, is President Trump's behaviour in this affair whiter than white? I don't know. Possibly not. Is General Flynn's behaviour in this affair whiter than white? I haven't got a clue. Is the dark state acting in a way which should greatly alarm anyone who cares about democracy and the rule of law? Absolutely.
Now, I happened to listen to President Trump's press conference that he gave on Thursday, and I was so surprised. He actually raised the issue of General Flynn's conversations being leaked by the intelligence community, but he didn't stop there. He brought up his private conversation with the president of Mexico that he said was then leaked. I saw it as headline news the next day. And a few days later, his private phone conversation with the president of Australia that became headline news. What's going on here? He raised those issues, calling out leaks from the American intelligence agencies.
Well, on all those issues, those conversations were reported in the media in a way that was designed to put President Trump in the worst possible light. Now, he maintains that in certain material respects, those leaks were based on untruths or distortions or warped reporting. And as far as I can see, that is certainly the case on a number of those occasions. So what he was doing was he wasn't taking this lying down. These things happened, these leaks happened, but whereas other politicians might have just sort of moved on because they didn't want to revisit the whole issue, they didn't want to reopen the row with the media. Crucially, nobody wants to reopen a row with the media. Everyone wants to sort of calm the media down, wants to get them on side, wants to show a better face, wants to have a good relationship. Not this president. This president has identified the media as a major force against democracy and truthfulness. And I have to say, on that broad analysis, I entirely agree with him, having followed his campaign insofar as I could through the media. I was astounded, and I'm astounded now by the way in which he is being reported with unbridled malice and distortion, and not just inaccuracies, but real warped reporting. Now, the other side, the media would say, but look, we're calling him out on his own lies.
Right.
And I have to say, they are not wrong.
Right.
They are not wrong.
Right.
There are various things that he has said, and that press conference was one case where he said something like, I was elected with the most electoral college votes of any president since Ronald Reagan. And as far as I can see, that's not true. Now, this to me is a very troubling situation. I'm used to dealing with honesty. As far as I'm concerned, if a politician tells a lie, then he's a liar and you can't believe him. However, this is much more complicated because here you have a situation where, in my opinion, based on the evidence that I've seen over a long period of time, he's telling big truths against very big lies which have kind of derailed the whole national and international conversation for decades. Right. Lies promulgated by the media, which has produced one view of the world and which not only removes any other view of the world from public knowledge, but demonizes anyone who has the other view of the world. So I agree with him entirely on this broad agenda, and he's identifying the media as not something that has to be kept sacrosanct in a democracy because the media keep you honest. Right. But if the media have become corrupt, then they corrupt the body politic. I believe that to be true. But you have a president who clearly, his view of reality is something he creates in the way that he wants to create it. So you have this very, very difficult situation where, his agenda against the media distortion is correct. On the other hand, he himself is not telling the entire truth all the time. I find that very difficult. I find that, to put it mildly, a complex situation.
Wow. All right. Well, fascinating insights, Melanie. It's time to go. But thank you so much. And again, Trump's the gift that keeps on giving, right?
Oh my goodness. Are we ever going to talk about anything else, do you think?
If you could say, everyone must agree, if there's one thing he's successful at is to make sure that everyone's talking about him all the time.
This is political genius, you see.
That's exactly. Well, thank you so much. Have a fabulous, fabulous week, Melanie.
And you.
Thank you, everyone, for watching.
Thank you,
for all of your questions and comments, we'll try to get them in the comment section on Facebook. Take care.
Bye.